Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you very
much.
much, Marianne, for asking me to talk. I've been asked to talk about what health professionals can do in these rather dire circumstances. I'll offer a view on why we need to act, why it's difficult to get action, and why, regardless, we need to do what we need to do. And to do this, I'm going to briefly gallop through 5 particular things. First of all, what factors determine, for better or worse, our health? We've had a bit about this, but I've got a nice little slide to show it. Second, what changes to our planet are driving the climate and ecological emergency? Third, the present and likely future consequences to health, which you've already heard about quite a lot, so I won't be long on that. You know where the changes are most keenly felt, so I'll ignore that too. And then really talk about why it's so difficult to tackle these emergencies and what health professionals must do. First, I'll tell you a little joke which may help us understand the severity of the situation. There are 2 remote planets, Planet A and B, and they have health professionals on both. And Planet A says to Planet B, "Can you help me? We've got a bit of an emergency here. We have an epidemic of Homo sapiens." Planet B says, "We had that a while back. Don't worry, it doesn't last long." Now, I hope that what we can do will forestall the dire consequences of what will happen if we don't do anything. So first, what determines our health? Well, all of you know the antecedents to health, but this is a little diagram which reminds us that healthcare is only a very small component of what provides and determines whether we have good or bad health. Our genes may make up another 30%, but most importantly, as we all know, is the environment, the way we're born, live, learn, play, love, work, age, and die. And because this is where where the climate and ecological emergency will most vigorously impact, this is, of course, the territory we have to be concerned with most. So what does the climate and ecological emergency look like? Well, I use the Rockström, the institute in Sweden's planetary boundaries to help me understand this. And it's, I think, a very helpful way of so doing. And as you know, there are 9 planetary boundaries. For good human health and the health of other than humans, we have to live within these boundaries. You can see in the next few things how we're transgressing these boundaries. Climate change is worse. That's the CO2 levels, land change and deforestation. And I'm going to give a little example of how much worse this is in a minute. Biosphere diversity, genetic and functional worse. Biochemical imbalances, that's the phosphorus and nitrogen runoffs into water, much worse. The novel entities, there have been 140,000 novel entities since 1950. Most of them are getting into our environment and causing big hassles. And then all the other factors are worse apart from the ozone layer. So let's take a quick look at the empirical evidence of what these planetary transgressions are doing. We know that the carbon dioxide levels have risen from 250 in 1850 to 420 now, and are still going up. We know that 25% of agricultural land is degraded. This could be 95% by 2050. Think of the consequences of that. We know that extreme drought affects 18% of land now, and 47% of land, in 1950, and 47% of land now, getting worse and worse by the year. We know that we're having a 6th extinction event with species lost 1,000 times the pre-industrial base rate. We know that there's widespread eutrophication, that's the presence of nitrogen and phosphorus in water, with algal blooms and ensuing hypoxia of sea and water, which decimates fish and other residents of the water. We know that plastics are now present in all oceans, and insect populations are plummeting. So the health impacts, it's not surprising that with these ecological boundaries being transgressed, and with the various problems that are ensuing as a consequence, that there are significant and dreadful health impacts. We've already talked about some of these, but just again to recap, 7 million premature deaths, worth perhaps $2.2 trillion per year. That's 3% of global GDP. 127 more people experiencing food insecurity. Heat-related deaths going up dramatically. Lots of work days lost because of hot days, and this constitutes a large percentage of GDP in many low-income countries. We talked about the increased transmission of various diseases. We talked about the difficulties of healthcare infrastructure, which are significant, and we've already heard a lot about. We haven't talked much about eco-anxiety, which is a dominant feature of many societies now, and which is causing major problems in the health, particularly of young people. Given these health impacts, and given that we know what we do know, why has it been so very difficult to get any purchase? Health professionals have been alerting the population to these problems for 35 years in some circumstances. And yet, as you can see, things are getting worse, not better. We have to understand quite why that should be. And of course, some of it is the problems with money and finances. And perhaps I should first look at the fossil fuel companies. Many of them say they're going towards a non-fossil fuel future, but last year there was $1 trillion invested in exploration, and only 4% of that went into renewables. This is a 10% increase from 2021, and the fossil fuel countries are making £4 trillion in profit. The banks are lending the fossil fuel companies £500 billion for exploration. Our governments subsidize the fossil fuel companies by at least $305 billion a year. That's a gross underestimate, probably, but it's a very minimal. That's the minimal amount that we do it. The fossil fuel companies spent $140 million in the 2020 federal elections, persuading many of the representatives in the American government to do everything they could to bar action on climate change. This has gone up from 23 million in 2006. In contradistinction, governments in Copenhagen in 2009 promised $100 billion a year for climate action, and it's only just, that figure has only just been reached now. So we've had 14 or 15 years of really very little investment from the international community into climate mitigation. This is all very depressing and makes one feel very despondent. And the final problem, of course, is us. We humans seem to be addicted to consumerism and growth, and that is inimical to us tackling the climate change. We have somehow to understand the psychological transformation that we're going to have to get over this. So what can we do? Well, we must decarbonize health. We talked about that. We've got to stress the relevance of win-win policies. We've talked about that too. Active transport, clean air, plant-based diets, regenerative agriculture, and those are all relatively straightforward things. What else should we and must we do? Well, we have to mobilize health professions through collective action. The UK Health Alliance on Climate Change is one way of so doing. It's an organization of 45 separate organizations responding 1.5 or 1.2 or 3 million health professionals in the UK. It's a model which we think should be adapted throughout the world. We have to campaign for a circular economy. Health professionals have got to be engaged in wider issues. We need to understand that growth and consumerism is inimical to us being able to tackle the climate emergency. We health professionals have to be educated in understanding the importance of getting into circular economies and not relying exclusively on growth, which is resource consumptive. We have to vote for only those who prioritize the clinical climate emergency. Every vote we have counts in whatever circumstances we are, whether it's in our workplace, in our local community, or nationally or internationally. We have to declare the ecological emergency as a public health emergency. WHO is already doing this, so are many others, but we have to insist that's the case and use our voices to make that prominent the whole time. We have to do even more. We have to recognize that what's happening, the collusion between fossil fuel companies, banks, and governments is in fact ecocidal and genocidal. We need to raise the stakes. Health professionals need to understand that we're facing a catastrophic situation which is not being helped by this collusion between fossil fuel companies, banks, and governments. And some of us have got to consider taking non-violent direct action. Health professionals are much regarded and being involved in these initiatives to try and stop, for instance, the opening of fossil fuel exploration sites is a really important action for health professionals. So we've got a lot to do. We hope we can use our status and our influence to do it. And I wish you all the best of luck in stopping what is, at the moment, looks like a catastrophic emergency. So thank you very much.